Data is a tremendous important tool to advance the way we go about making policy, whether it's about setting the agenda and the priorities for policy, or whether it's about designing policy and subsequently evaluating whether anything worked, because data allows us to provide answers to basically four important questions. One is, what's the current situation? So we actually have a baseline to make policy from. Two, why is it that we are in the current situation? So that we actually have an understanding of the root causes why we are in the current situation. And thirdly, we can also use data to forecast, or in some cases even nowcast, so that we can see how it will evaluate. And lastly, it allows us to be more prescriptive, because data can also allow us to really measure whether an intervention makes an impact. There are many insights that we've learned during this conference. First of all, trust matters. Without trust, data won't be able to have the value it seeks to portray. But there are many other insights that quite often are insights that actually explain how we get trust. First one is who and when is it legitimate to use data. So we need to really start thinking about authorities, who has the legitimacy to use data, which could also mean that we need new positions, such as data stewards, that really can understand how do we actually get the legitimacy for using data as such. The other insight is that we actually also need to understand what's the value of data, and to what extent is there evidence on how you can get the value, so that we not only are legitimate but also effective in how we go about using data. And those two, legitimacy and effectiveness, can also contribute to trust, which, as I mentioned, was the big overall insight from this conference. The big messages for policymakers are that they, first of all, have a responsibility to use data, in addition to have a responsibility to protect how data is being used. I think it's a dual responsibility, because without using data, their policies might be less effective, and as a result ineffective in how they go about their work. But you need to do it in a responsible way. And that's why there is an additional responsibility, which is the responsibility to prevent harm and to prevent misuse of data that could be used when you start using data. There are many messages for the research and think tank community coming out of this conference. First of all, is that there is a lot more work to be done for researchers and think tanks to actually provide the evidence base that we need in order to understand what works as it relates to data for policy. But we also need to have researchers and think tanks become more engaged in both the policymaker world, so that we know what they need to know as it relates to data for policy, but also they need to become engaged with citizens as such, so that they get the social license for actually doing the research, and more importantly for using data as it relates to understanding what works in the data for policy environment.